The flash of camera bulbs illuminated the sleek conference room of Stratton Tech Industries as Jasmine Clark, a stunning black model in her late 20s, stood perfectly still during a corporate photo shoot. The tech executives barely glanced at her beyond assessing whether she fit their diversity initiative marketing campaign. What none of them knew was that behind her flawless appearance and camera-ready smile stood one of the most brilliant mathematical minds of her generation, and today, a chance encounter would reveal a genius they never saw coming. In just a few hours, this just a pretty face would solve a problem that had stumped their entire engineering team for 6 months. Before we dive into this story, don't forget to subscribe and like for more amazing stories like this one. You won't believe what happens next. Jasmine had been modeling for 8 years, building a successful career in an industry that valued her beauty but rarely acknowledged her intellect. She had learned early on to keep her MIT mathematics degree and her published research papers to herself. Clients wanted a model who looked good in their products, not someone who might make them feel intellectually inadequate. "Can we get the model to smile more?" called out Derek Whitmore, Stratton Tech's arrogant chief technology officer, without even looking at Jasmine directly. He spoke about her as if she were a prop, not a person standing 15 feet away. "Her name is Jasmine," said Monica, the photographer, with a hint of irritation. Derek waved his hand dismissively. "Whatever, just make sure she looks, approachable, but not too intelligent. We want diversity in our marketing, but we don't want to intimidate our customer base." Jasmine maintained her professional smile, though his words stung. She had heard variations of this her entire career. Beautiful women weren't supposed to be brilliant, and if they were, they certainly shouldn't show it. "Let's take a break," Monica announced, sensing the tension. 15 minutes, everyone. But what happened during that break would change everything. Jasmine walked to the break room to grab water, still wearing her elegant business attire from the photo shoot. As she passed by one of the conference rooms, she noticed a whiteboard covered in complex mathematical equations and a group of frustrated engineers staring at it in defeat. Unable to resist, she paused in the doorway. The problem on the board was a differential equation related to quantum computing optimization, specifically trying to minimize error rates in quantum bit operations. She recognized it immediately as a variation of problems she had worked on during her graduate research. "We've been stuck on this for 6 months," one of the engineers was saying. "If we can't solve the decoherence problem, the entire quantum processor project is dead. We're talking about a $50 million investment down the drain." The lead engineer, Dr. Sarah Chen, ran her hands through her hair in frustration. "I've consulted with 3 universities and 2 private research firms. Everyone says it's theoretically solvable, but no one has actually solved it." Jasmine found herself analyzing the equation, her mind automatically working through the problem. She noticed something the team had missed. They were approaching the solution from the wrong angle. The answer required a different mathematical framework, one that combined topology with quantum field theory, in an unconventional way. She should have walked away. She should have gone back to the photo shoot and continued being what they expected her to be, beautiful and silent. Instead, she knocked on the door. The moment that would shock everyone was about to begin. "Excuse me," Jasmine said, her voice polite but confident. "I couldn't help but notice your problem. May I take a look?" The engineers turned to stare at her, their faces showing confusion and barely concealed condescension. Here was a model in designer clothes, interrupting their highly technical work. Derek Whitmore, who had been observing the team's failure, let out a dismissive laugh. "Are you lost? The photo shoot is down the hall. We're working on actual complex problems here." "I understand," Jasmine replied calmly. "I have a PhD in applied mathematics from MIT, specializing in quantum computing theory, and I believe your approach to the decoherence problem is fundamentally flawed." The room fell absolutely silent. Derek's smirk froze on his face. Dr. Sarah Chen studied Jasmine with new interest. "What do you mean, flawed?" Jasmine walked to the whiteboard, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She picked up a marker and began writing with the fluid confidence of someone who had solved problems like this hundreds of times. "You're treating this as a linear optimization problem," Jasmine explained, her marker moving rapidly across the board. But quantum decoherence operates in a nonlinear topological space. You need to apply a modified version of the Jones polynomial to map the error states. What happened next left the entire engineering team speechless. Jasmine's hands moved with practiced precision, filling the whiteboard with elegant mathematical notation. She integrated concepts from algebraic topology, quantum field theory, and computational complexity in ways the team hadn't considered. Here, she said, circling a section of her work, you can see that by introducing a topological invariant into your error correction algorithm, you create a stable manifold that resists decoherence at the quantum level. The engineers crowded around the board, their eyes scanning her work with increasing amazement. Dr. Chen's mouth had literally dropped open. This is brilliant, Sarah whispered. The topological approach eliminates the phase error completely. Why didn't we think of this? Because you were constrained by conventional thinking, Jasmine said, continuing to write. You assumed the solution had to work within standard quantum computing frameworks, but if you're willing to reconceptualize the problem space itself, entirely new solutions become possible. She stepped back from the board, revealing a complete mathematical framework that not only solved their 6-month problem, but opened up new possibilities for quantum computing they hadn't even considered. Derek Whitmore had gone pale. His earlier arrogance completely evaporated. How do you know all this? The revelation that followed would expose everyone's prejudices. Jasmine turned to face the room, her expression calm but her eyes showing the accumulated frustration of years being underestimated. I completed my PhD at MIT in 3 years instead of 5, she began, her voice steady. My dissertation on topological approaches to quantum error correction was published in the Journal of Quantum Information Science and won the Weinberg Prize for Innovative Research in Theoretical Physics. She walked slowly around the room, making eye contact with each engineer who had dismissed her moments earlier. After graduation, I was offered positions at IBM Research, Google Quantum AI, and CERN. I turned them all down because I wanted to pursue modeling, something I had done part-time during graduate school and genuinely enjoyed. But you're a model, Derek stammered, still struggling to reconcile what he was seeing. Yes, Jasmine replied. I'm a model who also happens to hold patents on 3 quantum computing algorithms, has published 12 peer-reviewed papers, and serves as an anonymous consultant for 2 major tech companies who don't know that their Dr. Clark is the same woman whose face sells their products. She picked up her phone and pulled up her academic profile. The list of publications, citations, and awards was staggering. Dr. Chen scrolled through it, her expression shifting from shock to something like shame. But Jasmine wasn't finished revealing the truth. Do you know why I keep my work anonymous? Jasmine continued, her voice growing more passionate. Because the moment people see my face, they assume I'm just a pretty decoration. I've been in meetings where my published papers were discussed, and the same men praising Dr. Clark's brilliant work would turn to me and ask if I could bring them coffee. She gestured to the whiteboard covered in her equations. I've learned to let my work speak for itself, hidden behind initials and anonymous submissions. Because in a world where beautiful women aren't supposed to be brilliant, sometimes the only way to be taken seriously is to be invisible. The room was deathly silent. Several engineers looked ashamed, remembering their own dismissive reactions when she had first entered. This industry talks constantly about diversity and inclusion, Jasmine said. But what you really want is the appearance of diversity in your marketing photos. You don't want women who challenge you intellectually. You certainly don't want black women who might be smarter than you. Derek opened his mouth to object, but Dr. Sarah Chen cut him off. She's absolutely right, Derek. And you know it. What happened next would change the entire company. Monica, the photographer, had followed Jasmine and witnessed the entire exchange. She had been quietly filming on her phone, capturing both the mathematical brilliance and the powerful words that followed. Jasmine, Monica said softly, may I share this? The world needs to see this. Jasmine paused, considering. For years, she had hidden her intellect to make others comfortable. But watching these engineers' faces transform from condescension to respect to shame, she realized that staying silent wasn't protecting her. It was protecting their prejudices. "Yes," Jasmine said finally. "Share it." Within hours, Monica's video went viral. The footage of a supermodel in designer clothes solving advanced quantum computing problems while eloquently exposing industry bias was shared millions of times. The hashtag, more than a model, began trending worldwide, but the immediate impact was right there in that conference room. Dr. Sarah Chen approached Jasmine with genuine humility. "Dr. Clark, I apologize for any assumptions I made. Your solution is extraordinary, and I would be honored if you would consider consulting on our quantum computing project. Officially, not anonymously, and at full consultant rates," added James Park, Stratton Tech CEO, who had rushed to the room after hearing what happened. "Dr. Clark, I've been trying to recruit the anonymous Dr. J. Clark for 2 years. I never imagined." He trailed off, the irony of the situation clear to everyone. The transformation happening in real time was unprecedented. "Let me be clear," James said, addressing his entire team. "We just witnessed a failure of culture, not just individual bias. We hired Dr. Clark for a photo shoot while her anonymous consulting work has been saving our quantum computing division. That's not just ironic, it's inexcusable." He turned to Jasmine. "I want to offer you a position as Chief Quantum Computing Advisor, with full authority over the quantum processor project. And I want your face and your name on that work. No more hiding behind initials." Jasmine considered the offer carefully. "I'll accept on 3 conditions. First, you establish a program to actively recruit and promote women and minorities in your technical divisions, not just your marketing materials." James nodded immediately. "Done." "Second, you create a scholarship fund for young women and minorities studying STEM fields. I want to see real investment in changing the pipeline, not just diverse photos in your annual report." "Absolutely," James agreed. "And third," Jasmine said, a slight smile playing at her lips, "I continue modeling, because I shouldn't have to choose between being beautiful and being brilliant. I can be both, and the world needs to see that women can be both." The ripple effects of this single day would transform an entire industry. Within weeks, Jasmine's story had sparked a national conversation about bias in STEM fields and the ways society underestimates women, especially women of color, based on their appearance. Major tech companies began reviewing their own hiring and promotion practices, discovering their own Dr. J. Clarks, brilliant women whose contributions had been overlooked or undervalued. Jasmine's quantum computing solution, now officially attributed to her, revolutionized the field. The algorithm she created on that whiteboard became the foundation for Stratton Tech's quantum processor, which was successfully launched 8 months later and generated over $200 million in its first year. More importantly, Jasmine became a visible advocate for women in STEM. She continued modeling but made it clear in every interview, every photo shoot, and every public appearance that her beauty and her brilliance coexisted, and that one did not diminish the other. The scholarship fund she had demanded grew into a multi-million-dollar program supporting young women and minorities in mathematics and physics. Applications flooded in from talented students who saw themselves in Jasmine's story, people who had been told they couldn't be both smart and beautiful, both technical and creative, both scientists and artists. Derek Whitmore, the CTO, who had dismissed her so casually, resigned after the video went viral. His replacement was Dr. Sarah Chen, who made diversifying the technical team her first priority. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Jasmine stood in front of a lecture hall at MIT, speaking to a room full of students about quantum computing and challenging stereotypes. She was still modeling. In fact, she had just signed a major contract with a tech company that wanted her to represent both their products and their values. "The most dangerous thing about stereotypes," Jasmine told the students, "isn't that they limit how others see you, it's that they can limit how you see yourself. For years I hid my intellect because I thought being taken seriously as a model meant I couldn't be taken seriously as a scientist." She clicked to show the now famous video of her at the whiteboard. This moment went viral not because what I did was extraordinary in my field. Quantum physicists solve complex problems every day. It went viral because people couldn't reconcile the image of a model in designer clothes with the reality of a brilliant mathematician. That's the world's problem, not ours, Jasmine continued, her voice strong and clear. We don't have to choose between different parts of ourselves to make other people comfortable. We can be multifaceted, complex, contradictory human beings, and our brilliance shines brightest when we refuse to diminish any part of who we are. The lesson Jasmine taught extended far beyond mathematics. A young woman in the audience raised her hand. Dr. Clark, what would you say to someone who's afraid that being beautiful will make people take them less seriously in STEM? Jasmine smiled. I'd say that's a legitimate fear based on real experiences. But I'd also say this. The people who can't see past your appearance to recognize your intellect aren't worth impressing. Do brilliant work, sign your name to it, and let your results speak louder than their prejudices. She paused, looking around the room at faces representing every background and identity. And here's what I learned from that day at Stratton Tech. The moment I stopped hiding my intelligence to make others comfortable was the moment I became truly powerful. Not because I solved a hard problem. I'd been solving hard problems for years, but because I did it visibly, undeniably, in a way that forced people to confront their own biases. The movement Jasmine started continued to grow. 3 years after the viral video, Jasmine had helped launch Beautiful Minds, a non-profit organization connecting women in STEM with mentorship, funding, and visibility. The organization had supported over 500 women in pursuing advanced degrees in mathematics, physics, and computer science. She had also published a best-selling book, More Than a Pretty Equation, which became required reading in diversity and inclusion programs at major tech companies worldwide. But perhaps most impactingly, Jasmine had changed the conversation about women in STEM. She appeared regularly on magazine covers, sometimes in haute couture, sometimes in a lab coat, often in both, always with headlines celebrating her multifaceted identity. The quantum computing algorithm she had created that day now bore her full name, the Clark Topological Error Correction Protocol. It was being used by researchers worldwide, each application a reminder that genius appears in unexpected forms and that assumptions about intelligence based on appearance are not just wrong, they're costly. The ending was really just the beginning. On the 5th anniversary of the whiteboard moment, as it had come to be known, Stratton Tech hosted a celebration. The Quantum Processor Project had grown into a billion-dollar division, directly traceable to Jasmine's breakthrough solution. James Park addressed the crowd. 5 years ago, we hired Dr. Jasmine Clark for a photo shoot. We saw a beautiful model and assumed that's all she was. We were wrong in every possible way, and that mistake taught us the most valuable lesson in this company's history. He gestured to Jasmine, who stood at the front of the room looking stunning in both her elegant dress and the equation-covered silk scarf around her neck, a custom piece featuring her own mathematical work. Dr. Clark taught us that talent doesn't look like what we expect. Brilliance doesn't conform to our stereotypes. And when we judge people based on appearance rather than ability, we don't just fail them, we fail ourselves and lose access to the very innovation and genius we claim to be seeking. Jasmine took the microphone, her presence commanding the room effortlessly. I want to thank everyone at Stratton Tech, not for that photo shoot 5 years ago, but for being willing to see your own blind spots and change. Real growth requires that kind of humility. She looked out at the audience, which included dozens of young women and minorities who had been hired or promoted as a result of the company's transformed culture. To everyone watching who has ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told you can't be both beautiful and brilliant, creative and technical, or anything else that defies someone else's limited imagination, I see you. I believe in you, and I promise you that the world is slowly, finally starting to see what I've always known. You are more than they imagine, capable of more than they expect, and absolutely unlimited in your potential. The model who solved the impossible had changed everything. Dr. Jasmine Clark had proven that genius waits in unexpected places, that beauty and brilliance are not mutually exclusive, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to hide any part of who you are. The woman they had seen as just a model had solved a problem that stumped experts, launched a movement that transformed an industry, and taught the world that our assumptions about intelligence based on appearance say far more about our limitations than theirs. And somewhere in the audience, a young black girl watched Jasmine speak and thought for the first time, maybe I don't have to choose. Maybe I can be everything I want to be. Because Jasmine Clark had shown her and the world that being underestimated is only a setback until the moment you prove them spectacularly, undeniably wrong. The end of one equation. The beginning of infinite possibilities.